Chapter 5, The Reckoning, 2046. Scene 13, Todd. As he fell toward the earth, Todd's grin was so wide that his jawbone hurt and his muscles ached. In the black tube 100 feet ahead, Irene led in a nosedive toward the villa. She banked just before crashing into the roof. There was a flash of terracotta, then a glimpse of the horizon, as Todd made the U-shaped swerve toward the sky. Soaring with abandon, he savored the warm embrace of endless blue. Todd had often thought while riding the ocean's waves that the exhilaration must be akin to flying. Never in a million years did he expect to find out, and, oh, how wrong he'd been. The metal fuselage and the cushion beneath his belly were gone. As long as he kept his hands and feet against the sensors of the tube, it was as if he were blazing through the air like a superhero. His grin widened as he imagined a plane full of passengers gawking from their window seats. Todd anticipated Irene's message even before his cranial phone came to life in his head. "Aye, you okay back there? T, Jesus, I wish you'd stop asking me that." He clenched his teeth when she leveled off and headed toward Avalon. "Aye, I'm just checking. You know it's okay to be nervous, right? T, I'm not nervous, and I'm not ready to go in." "Aye, you have to. It's protocol." "T, that's bullshit, Irene. I've seen you, Olympia, and Devon fly around for 30 minutes. The airship was cloaked, but the tube allowed the user to see beyond the containment field. Blades of sunlight cascaded across the emerald ceiling as the massive airship floated like a small island among the clouds. God, Todd thought, that is so beautiful. He was thoroughly tired of being nagged and could not accept, despite all the evidence to the contrary, that she didn't think he could handle this. No one doubted Todd Giannopoulos, especially a woman who acted as if he were the center of her world. "Aye, we flew longer because we're experienced. This is your first time, remember?" Todd barked out a laugh. It was so like her to miss the irony of treating him like a virgin. "It's a good thing I went back to those shots," he thought. The treatments were birth control for men, and it had only been 2 months since Irene's first time. Now that she knew the pleasure of sex, his sweet little princess wanted it hot and ready every day. Irene was gorgeous in the nude, but she was also the most selfish lover Todd had ever been with. Women enjoyed taking off his clothes, but Irene did it with the rapacious flair of a child unwrapping a present. It was clear she didn't care whether he wanted what was going to happen next. Lord knows, Todd didn't mind being her toy, but she was starting to get on his nerves by the way she wanted to live when they weren't in bed. For a woman who could be anywhere within the hour, Irene turned out to be quite the homebody. She liked to take long baths together, which was nice, but she expected Todd to sit still for an hour while she applied lotion and preened his hair. If he had a fucking dollar for all the time she asked him to change out of one outfit into another, Todd would never have to work again. Earlier that day, she stormed out of his closet in a hissy fit. "You've got to get a new wardrobe," she insisted. Todd had shrugged that declaration off until he realized she'd arranged a tailor in Paris and another in Milan. The tubes were the fastest way to Avalon, and Irene's desire to have what she wanted trumped her fear that her fantasy world would shatter if they left his damn villa. He didn't mind shopping, but he knew that's all they would do once they got to Europe. Fuck it, Todd thought. If you can do 30, I can do 30 minutes in this thing. He banked away from the airship and headed back toward the shore. As his terracotta roof came into view, it was like staring down at a prison in which he'd been locked away for weeks. Irene had turned his home into a paddock and had turned him into a stallion that she rode whenever she wanted. He was a global celebrity and didn't appreciate being compelled to stay hidden from the rest of the world. Feeling a sudden urge to see the water, he swerved away from the villa and shot toward the Pacific. "Aye, hey, where are you going?" "T, watch this." Olympia had explained that the tube's only limitation was how far it could fly away from Avalon. Todd had watched with envy as she, Devin and Irene soared over the ground, but he noticed they stayed clear of the ocean. Typical land lovers, Todd thought, afraid to get a little wet. I, don't get too close to the water. T, why not? I, the V-drive won't be able to control the air. The V what? Todd thought as he spotted about a dozen monster waves. Their beautiful curves spun like massive wheels, which, every now and then, smashed together, releasing incredible sprays of mist. What are you doing, you idiot? The caustic sound of Olympia's voice came as a shock. Where the fuck are the speakers, Todd wondered. The feeling was subtle, so it took him a minute to notice that he was no longer flying. At some point, he'd lost altitude and had become locked in a free fall toward the ocean. Olympia said, "There's too much moisture in the air. Pull up." Like an echo, Irene's message was laced with desperation. Todd, pull up. As the rolling surface of the Pacific rushed forward, Todd tried to repeat the maneuver he and Irene had used to turn away from the roof. That seemed like an eternity ago. It was a struggle, but he managed to tilt the tube enough to see the horizon. The western sea spread out like a vast, writhing beast. Todd realized he'd stopped breathing as he slowly gained altitude. Then, as if it were trying to douse a fire, the ocean released a spray of mist that struck the metal exterior of the vessel with a whack. Todd went from pointing up to pointing down. The 400-pound tube stabbed the surface of the water at 200 miles an hour. While flying in the air, he'd heard a slight whistle, but plunging through the ocean produced a massive roar. Todd had no idea whether the vessel provided oxygen, whether it was waterproof, or whether the all-powerful Olympia Dacos had something on the airship capable of fishing him out of the sea. As his heart pounded in his chest, he wanted to scream. When he took his hands off the sensors to ball his fists, his perception of shooting through the water disappeared. The deeper he sank, the more the tight metal compartment felt like a coffin. He tried to send a message to Irene, but his mind was too panicked to launch Monaco. After what seemed like an hour, there was an eerie silence and a sense of isolation so intense that it filled Todd with dread. He felt his eyes close, unsure whether he was losing consciousness or whether the darkness all around was slowly swallowing him whole. The metal under his hands and feet and the soft, cushioned bed that supported his belly was replaced by the formless, shapeless sense of falling. It was like going under before an operation, but the abrupt descent into oblivion had come without warning. Was he being sedated, or was he dying? He couldn't move his hands, which was the only noticeable change since the space was too tight to move anything else. Todd had always been confident that death wasn't a problem as long as his feet were flat against the board and his grip was firm against the handlebars. He hated the idea of being paralyzed as he slid inexorably into the dark unknown. If this is the end, he raged to himself. He raged to the world. He raged to Irene. Then this is the end. What kind of life would it have been if he'd never tried flying in the tube after seeing 3 other people do it? Maybe it was the fact that Irene had compelled him to stay in the house for weeks. Maybe it was the doubt expressed through her nagging. But out of a lifetime of memories, Todd's mind was cast back to that fateful day 2 months ago. They hadn't seen each other since Olympia's party, and their reunion was surrounded by weird events. Going back to Pepperdine to see Razor, hosting Devin and Olympia as a couple on the deck, and then there was that sweet, awkward kiss, which, oddly, felt like it had just happened a moment ago. As his filler came into view, Todd noticed that only one of the black tubes remained on the beach. He felt a pang of anger, remembering how Olympia had strode across the sand, appraising his home as if she wasn't sure it was worthy of her presence. "What's the matter?" Todd said. "My place ain't good enough for them?" Ever since their kiss at the cove, Irene had a dreamy expression on her face. She was holding his hand, which she began to swing back and forth like a little kid. Then she said in a nursery rhyme voice, "Devin had to go to work." "Oh yeah?" Todd grunted. "So what? He needed Olympia to give him a ride?" Irene giggled. An airship is the fastest way to get from here to the Seychelles. Yanking his arm, she tried to pull him toward the house. Todd didn't need telepathy to know that he was dealing with a virgin. Instinct and experience, however, made him wary of moving too fast. He planted his feet in the sand, determined to seize this opportunity to get some answers. Using a firm, right here, right now tone, he said, "The Seychelles is an archipelago on the other side of the planet. Are you saying that's where they are right now?" She was brimming with impatience by the way she bounced around and rolled her eyes. "Yes," she said, pulling his arm. I guess she's ready, Todd thought. But, God, I'm pretty sure that was her first kiss. They'd been dating long enough for Todd to know that she was cloistered as a child. Had she even had a boyfriend, he wondered? Being eager for sex wasn't the same as being prepared to do it. Todd wanted to stall just a little longer. He nodded at the tube and said, "I'd like to take a ride in that thing at some point today." The change in Irene's demeanor was instantaneous. "No," she shouted. Todd cocked his head and narrowed his eyes. "Why not?" She said, "I don't want anything to happen to you." The sound of someone sobbing was the first thing he noticed as the memory disappeared and he opened his eyes. The shock of illumination made him wonder whether he was in heaven, but his answer came with the throbbing of his heart, the pain in his chest, and the soreness in his muscles. The person crying leapt to their feet, threw themselves onto the bed, and wrapped their arms around his chest. Todd looked down, saw the red curls, and knew they were Irene's. "What happened?" he whispered. "I was afraid you had died." "Yeah," Todd said, "me too. But really, what happened?" Irene was sobbing so hard that the bed began to shake. Cringing from the pain, Todd rubbed her back. It's okay. Her face was buried in his chest, so Irene's voice was muffled when she said, "I'm never letting you out of the house again." "What?" Todd tried to sit up, but the pain forced him back against the pillow. "Look, Irene, we've got to talk about that. There's no fucking way I'm gonna." Todd hadn't noticed that the door was open until he heard someone in the adjoining room hiss, "Give me a minute to check on him. Don't leave. I've got one more question." When Olympia's face came into view, Todd flinched. If her eyes were guns, he would be dead. Todd licked his lips, trying to get his dry mouth to project above a whisper. "Sorry about your tube," he croaked. Olympia folded her arms. "Your mistake may actually have been useful." "Oh?" Todd raised his eyebrow. "How so?" "Now I know we need a contingency plan in case some idiot decides to fly too close to the water." Irene's head shot up. "Olympia," she pleaded, "stop." The Daco swirled threw her hands in the air, let out a breath, and stormed out of the room. Gingerly, Todd managed to push his back against the headboard. He was tired and sore, but otherwise none the worse for wear. The room's decor was a tasteful blend of old and new. Todd had never been in a four-poster bed before. This one was massive. Its mahogany beams and silk canopy made it look like an antique, but the mattress was anything but. It was like floating in thin air. If it weren't for the pain, this would be the most comfortable he'd ever been in his life. The walls were emerald, except for a section that looked like the kind of display he'd seen in hospitals. Todd checked his vitals every day, so as he ticked through the readings, he knew his oxygen level, heart rate, and temperature were normal. His eyes went wide when he saw the date. "I've been out for 3 days," he said. Irene wiped her eyes in a quick, frantic motion. Olympia never thought about what they'd do if a tube fell into the water. So Devin called some guy who brought this amphibious thing that the Navy uses for deep-sea missions. Todd narrowed his eyes. How did they get here so fast? Irene climbed into the bed and snuggled under his arm. "We're not in California, but to answer your question, the Navy has a base near Malibu." Despite his pain, Irene was so distraught that his instinct was to comfort her. Stroking her back, he said, "I'll thank Devin the next time I see him. But you never answered my question. Why did I fall?" The V-drive only works when the moisture level in the air is low. Todd thought about the spray that had shot up from the ocean. It needs a clear, sunny sky. Exactly, Irene let out a breath. Or a dry room. When Todd narrowed his eyes, she continued, It's kind of like Dad's cranial phone. The V drive is used for all sorts of things. Dad's cranial phone, Todd thought. That was the first reference Irene had made to her father, Philip Harrington, as the founder of the company Telepath. Most pop watchers were happy Sixth Sense cranial customers, in addition to being staunch critics of the council's power. Todd had taken that uncomfortable contradiction to a whole new level by dating a patriarch's daughter. Or was it really a contradiction at all? Does the country need a council of nobles to have strong, innovative companies? The sound of Devon's deep voice shot through the door from the adjoining room, making Todd jump. I don't know, Olympia, he shouted. Why don't you ask your father? In a tense whisper, the couple continued to argue just beyond the door. Todd looked around the room again as his mind registered that Irene had said that they weren't in California. Where are we, exactly? He asked. She snuggled her head against his chest. We're in Olympia's private chamber on Avalon, she said. Then, following Todd's gaze through the door, she added, It's been a crazy morning. A lot of unusual stuff has happened. She hadn't answered Todd's question, but this was far too interesting to worry about that. Please, he said, do tell. Devon tendered his resignation from Onyx Force. Then, Brandon somehow seized control of Samantha and made us fly to D.C. Irene raised his arms and wrapped them around her shoulders like a shawl. Who's Samantha? Todd asked. I am. The voice had a slight British accent, or maybe, he thought, it was the exceedingly proper way in which the invisible thing spoke. Irene raised her chin until their eyes met. Todd, this is Samantha. Samantha, this is Todd. A pleasure to meet you. In a low voice, Todd said, The pleasure's all mine. In the next room, the couple broke apart. There was the whoosh of a door opening that Todd couldn't see. Olympia re-entered the room with her arms folded. Irene asked, Where's he going? Down to the meeting, Olympia said. Both Todd and Irene stared, confused. The Dacos Royal let out a breath. Apparently, Dad's instructed his army to do things they're not supposed to do. That's why Devon quit. The council's having their quarterly meeting, and there's a bill circulating through Congress that would have made Devon and all his soldiers outlaws. Irene leaned forward. My dad's down there? Sympathy softened the expression on Olympia's face. Yeah, she sighed. According to Devon, all hell's about to break loose. And we, Olympia waved her hand around the room to indicate the ship, have been sucked into it.